We've all heard how powerful countries like China, Russia, and all of NATO are. But what about the rest of the world? Surely there are some other strong countries out there that don't make the headlines. Welcome to Buried Origins. Today we'll be looking at 4 countries that you don't hear much about, but which pack a serious punch. So let's get into it. But first things first, this list isn't in any particular order. I'm not ranking these militaries in strength because that's mostly a pointless exercise. I mean, look at all the predictions of the supposedly second strongest military in the world, Russia, becoming laughable these last 3 years. Okay, for our first country, we're going to an area of the world called the Caucasus to visit Azerbaijan. This small country of 10 million packs a serious punch for its size, and it was actually the first country in the world to introduce drone warfare in the modern form that we see in Ukraine and expect to see in future wars. It did this when it went to war with its neighbors, the Armenians, in 2020 and again in 2023, and absolutely dominated them, ending the first war in just 44 days and the second in less than 24 hours, with decisive victories. During these wars, Azerbaijan completely upended the reputation of former Soviet militaries operating ancient equipment when it let loose with modern Turkish and Israeli drones and showed the world that drones could have an asymmetric effect in warfare, taking out multi-million-dollar systems like Armenian air defenses, while only costing a few $1,000s themselves. It was a revolution in military tactics, and the war was closely watched by every major fighting force in the world as a harbinger of what was to come. The Ukrainians were certainly watching as they used the same tactics 2 years later to negate Russia's advantage in equipment, and every major military is now integrating drones into its force structure. But it wasn't just the use of drones that established Azerbaijan's prowess on the battlefield. It was their use alongside nimble and effective special forces and coordinated artillery that made Azerbaijan's tactics resemble something closer to NATO's combined arms approach, rather than Soviet battle doctrine. So it definitely earned its place on this list as a powerful country you don't hear much about. Next up, we're going to Africa, to the country of Chad, a place that almost never gets discussed. Chad is in the heart of the desolate Sahel region, and its armed forces are probably the closest thing the world has to the Fremen fighters in Dune. They're known as incredibly tough desert warriors. I mean, their former president, Idris Deby, died in 2021, personally leading his troops on the battlefield to put down a rebellion. A modern world leader was leading his army into battle, like Richard the Lionheart or Saladin. It's a crazy country. And Chad's armed forces aren't flashy. No stealth jets, ballistic missiles, or modern battle tanks with night vision. But they have a reputation as a ferocious and disciplined fighting force. One of the ways they earned this reputation was from the Toyota War of 1987, called that because when Libya's ruler Muammar Gaddafi sent his formidable armed forces with their tanks and attack helicopters south to invade Chad, the Chadian armed forces hopped on their Toyota trucks and went north to fight them. It was tanks and helicopters up against pickup trucks, and the Chadians absolutely dominated the Libyans, winning a decisive victory under the command of Idris Deby, the president who died back in 2021. And their victory wasn't because the Chadians outnumbered the Libyans. In fact, it was the other way around. The Libyans outnumbered the Chadians 5-1 at times. It was a perfect example of why comparing militaries on paper is often a useless exercise, because on paper, the Libyans absolutely should have devastated the Chadians. But just like the Fremen, they faced down a technologically and numerically superior fighting force and used their wit, determination, knowledge of their land, and ruthlessness to decisively beat their enemy. Now in modern days, Chad has played a central role in fighting Boko Haram and other militant groups in the Sahel, and have continued to prove themselves a brutally strong fighting force. So Chad has certainly earned its place on this list. Okay, for the next one, we're staying in Africa, but going to a much smaller country, Rwanda. This small country and its allied militia are currently winning an undeclared war against the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is 89 times larger than Rwanda in size and 7 times larger in population. That's because despite how small Rwanda is, it has a really strong military, because its leader, Paul Kagame, has tried to model Rwanda after Israel, a country that he adores. To do that, he's prioritized strengthening his military with great success. Rwanda's special forces have a strong reputation, having been trained by Israel, the US, and the UK, and its regular military units have proven themselves well-disciplined and effective, operating with constant battlefield success in Mozambique and the Central African Republic, where they deployed to assist the governments with putting down rebellion. It's yet another country that punches way above its weight. Alright, for our final country, we're still staying in Africa and we're going north to Algeria, the second largest military in Africa after Egypt. Unlike the first three countries on this list, Algeria has not fought a war recently, but its armed forces are thought to be formidable, and it's a country that rarely gets mentioned in the news. Of course, we can't jump to conclusions based off of what's on paper, like I mentioned earlier, but Algeria does have as many fighter jets as major NATO powers like the UK and Germany, although they're Russian-made, so there's definitely a gap in quality. The Navy is quite strong as well, operating a mix of modern German and Chinese-built frigates, as well as some Russian-built submarines. And the ground forces compose a massive mechanized corps, with the largest number of tanks in Africa at roughly 1,000 modern Russian-made tanks. For reference, that's as much as the UK, Germany, France, and Italy have combined, although there's definitely a gap in quality. But with so much firepower, Algeria has definitely earned its place on this list. Okay, now of course, I have to do some honorable mentions. I didn't include Poland in the list because it's in NATO, and its recent military buildup is well publicized. But for those who haven't been following military affairs, the Russian invasion of Ukraine pushed Poland to undergo one of the largest and quickest military buildups in modern history, and Poland will be one of the world's premier land warfare powers by 2030. Next, we have Australia, which isn't mentioned much for its military, but does have quite a technologically advanced navy and air force capable of projecting power throughout Asia, despite it being small overall. And then we have Egypt, which has a formidable arsenal of weaponry and a very large military, but it hasn't fought a major war any time in the last 50 years, and it's certainly not an unknown military power. Finally, Vietnam doesn't get mentioned much these days, but it has the world's 8th or 9th largest military by active personnel, depending on how you count, so it remains incredibly tough. Well, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed reviewing the world's lesser-known military powers. If you did, please like and subscribe. See ya.